Hello and welcome to our interview. My name is Katya and I'm so excited for Elana to be here today. So we are actually at the Capital Club Mastermind in Bali. It's my first time in Bali. You've been here
Many times.
so many times. So we're here at this mastermind, which is actually 99.9% men. And when I was walking into a welcome dinner, I was so excited to see another woman here. And 30 minutes in the dinner, we actually happened to sit at the same table and we just hit it off immediately. We've connected on so many levels. And then 4 hours later, we were chatting about our most deepest wounds and
Darkest
traumas.
secrets. Yeah.
And that conversation was so inspiring and healing, really, for me. So, and both of us today in the morning sessions, we were actually happened to sit again at the same table, and both of us have the same idea. We wanted to do a podcast together because we both, I think, got really inspired and just honestly shocked with how many similarities we shared.
Correct.
So I'm excited for this convo that we
Thank you.
have. So welcome.
Thank you.
So I think one of the main themes, we talked about many things, but one of them is, women empowerment, what it is to be fierce leader, but also being married in a committed relationship with our amazing men who are also very strong and leaders, and kind of like what it entails and what are some of the challenges and the beautiful moments of it, and so much more. So I guess like we can start with the perspective on being in an environment like this. So as I've mentioned, there is probably like 100 people here and maybe like 4 women. So what are your thoughts? Like, how do you feel about being in an environment like this?
So such a good question. I think for me, it's inspiring, one, to be in this environment, like seeing the other side of like e-commerce, what's possible and things like that. But then I also have the part of me, the woman inside of me being like, it's a bit sad that not as many women take an opportunity to come into this type of masterminding and in a beautiful place like this and feeding off these types of men as well, because I find it so important that men and women in like the workplace, in business, in life can actually come together, because there's such like a predisposition that it's like men versus women. And I don't know if you've seen that like around, your circles, but it's like you need to be a strong, independent woman and do things on your own. But I'm like, well, I'm here supporting my husband and also the men in this type of business. Like, how beautiful. And it's sad that not as many partners are here, or not as many women feel that they can come to something like that, because it was intimidating. Like walking in and only seeing like pretty much 100 men and like 4 women, I was like, oh, can I be here? Should I be here? Like, am I imposing on anything? But I think there's so much beauty to see how men operate in this type of business, and how we can operate in this type of business, and how we can support our men in our lives that are in this business as well. How do you feel?
Yeah, no, I agree with you on a lot of the things. And yes, I mean, we have been traveling and attending so many events. So I feel like we're all the time together. And I guess at this point, I'm very used to being surrounded by a lot more men than women. That's why I crave the women connection so much. And when I have an opportunity, I host events or workshops or just chat at a fireplace, for hours. So I definitely agree that there is just not enough women in the space, or maybe this mastermind is mainly for men, but it's beautiful to see the partners supporting each other. And I know there's a lot of men who are married or have girlfriends, but like I don't see a lot of them here, which I get. It is intimidating, and I feel that every time we go somewhere. But then I'm like, okay, I am here to support you, but then also I have my free time and I go do something on my own as well.
Yeah.
So, but it's definitely inspiring, and I'm learning a lot from this badass man here.
Yes, the conscious men. That's how I see it. And I think
Yes.
it's been really beautiful to see like my man, like my husband, and I suppose your husband as well, like really up-level themselves in all aspects of life. And then to share that kind of moment with them in this space has just been phenomenal. I'm watching you evolve and grow, and that's all I ever ask for. I've been with my husband for almost 13 years. So we have been through everything, like highs, lows. I've been with him since I was 18. So now to see us in this more evolved state with other men, it's empowering for me as a woman, because I think society sometimes pushes us to believe that we're only empowered when we're on our own and only when we're with other women. But as you and I have spoken, like if you have a beautiful relationship with men and you can grow with a man and have, you know, good relationship with men in your life and have that bond, you can go so much further as well. It doesn't always have to be women and women. And yes, there's so much benefit to that. But there's also the other side of the coin, which is benefit in growing together with your partner.
100%. Yes. And I had a thought and I totally went somewhere else with that thought.
We'll come back.
But yeah, we've also chatted that we support our men and we actually work together, both of us, right? Kind of do business together and also have our own things. And we're also being the wife and the friend and the supporter. So there's so many different roles that we have to play when it comes to being in that committed relationship. So, and both of us chatted about this earlier, but I think it would be really cool to share with some of the other women who are supporting their husbands, maybe doing the business with them, like what it's like, and you know, how do you manage being his business partner, but also his wife, and being your feminine little self, you know, because I know we're both fierce and assertive in ways, which can get a little challenging sometimes when it comes to relationships. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, so this was like, I would say this is probably the one question that I had for every other woman that I met in this mastermind, because I knew there wasn't going to be many other women, and majority of them, if they're here, would be supporting their men in business. So for me, I've only just stepped into being a business partner with my husband. So I only just left corporate in April. So now that we've like come together, both in personal development, we both have our own clients, but we've also come together with like running a retreat, doing group programs. I do back end stuff. I'm the operational brain. My husband's the creative, big entrepreneur, big vision. And I have to like bring him down and be like, okay, well, I'm from corporate. I need to-do lists. Have you thought of legal obligations? Have you thought about XYZ? And I'm, you know, trying to bring everything together, and that has caused friction. And there's times where I have to say, George, like, I am your business partner. We're equal right now. You need to hear me about my strengths and what I can bring in terms of the organizational aspects. You can't just keep going on your side, doing your thing, going off, and so I'm having to run after you. Let's work more together. So it's been this tug of war of power, I would say. And yeah, I'm feisty. Like you and I spoke about this. We can crack the whip when we want to, but I can't get everywhere when I'm cracking 10 million whips all the time. I need to understand how to communicate
100%.
On his level. So it's been this beautiful kind of dance between allowing my masculine to come up into, you know, business and asserting my voice and my opinion on things, but then also allowing him to take the lead when he needs to. And then also trying to figure out how to be a wife, a friend, a lover, like at the same time. And it has been challenging at times. But I think for us, really, the communication piece has been phenomenal, because we go for our walks every morning. That's our thing. Every morning we wake up, go for our walks. And that's not when we've got business. We're not in, you know, his office. So it's not his domain. We're outside in nature and we're just talking one-to-one on the same level, on the same page. You do this, you do that. And that's been our saving grace, I will admit.
I love
and
that.
What about you? Have you felt the same?
Yeah, so for us, we kind of smoothly started to work together, because I was doing I had a marketing agency, so I was doing that. He was doing his projects and different industries, crypto and finance mainly. And we started to work together maybe about a year ago. And it has been bumpy. To the point where there were days where I'm like, I didn't marry you to do business with you. Like, I married you because I loved you and I want us to make each other happy. But it has definitely been a journey to really self-growth and understand how to communicate on his level, operating from his values when it comes to business. I mean, I've read so many different books, and like 5 love languages is one of the things that I go by every day, and I try to stay consistent with what he needs, in terms of like our relationship. And what I find is the more I'm feminine in our relationship, then he's more receiving of me when it comes to business. But I would agree that, of course, they take power in leadership and things like that, but then they don't have the skills that we have. For example, it's the same for us. It's operations, it's the details that we need to have altogether figured out for the business to actually grow and scale. For him, details is a nightmare. And sometimes like we would get into arguments when I would ask him so many questions because I need data points, right, to move something along. And he's like, you're too detailed. I'm like, well, this is what you need to go from A to B. There's got to be a strategy. There's got to be the details that are involved. So it's really just sitting down and communicating from a place of heart as well. And me explaining that, hey, if you really need my help, like, you need to be able to receive it. And now he's listening to me a lot more in terms of like, also we have intuition. Sometimes when it comes to like partnerships or going with one idea or the other one, I have very strong intuition, so I would tell him things, he wouldn't listen, and it would happen. And then now he's like, so what do you think about that? I'm like, okay, I'll tell you. And it's become a lot more smoother. But it's definitely, like you said, like you guys have the walks, it's important to have that blocked in your routine schedule, to have the time where there's no business talks. Like we have some rules, like when we lived in Vegas, we had a house. Now we're nomading for like 6 months, so it's
so cool though.
The routine has been very different, but we had a rule not to talk about business after 8 p.m. Like when we're having dinner, we're not discussing anything business related, and we stayed consistent for the most part. But then, of course, when it's business, it's like you talk about it, and we do the date nights every week, just to make sure that we still romantically are connected.
And it's so important as well.
Yeah, and then of course there's tricks and tips that I'm always learning. I also love talking to women about the specific subject, is like, what do you do, like in terms of balance in this? So yeah, that's kind of how we do it.
And do you also find people in your circles previously just haven't experienced this before? You haven't had someone to really bounce off these ideas until you've met people outside of your community, or like during your travels? Like, have you found there's been a disconnect with other women in your life that you haven't been able to have these discussions? Like, how do you do business? Because I found that.
I would say the disconnect with women, well, this kind of like a whole nother subject, but it used to be a lot. And that is related to how I was relating to women. The place that I was coming from was wounded feminine, and it was in general very hard for me to connect with women. I always thought they're better than me no matter what. Like it was, and it's also the self-worth and self-love thing, which we also talked about, that stems from the mother wounds and stuff like that. But when it comes to like asking about specific question, like how do you balance? No, I always find some really good insights. And then some other women are like, no, like we do not work with husbands because we want to save our marriage, which I also get.
Yes. Yeah. So I find also, as we spoke, we have the same type of feminine wound, right? But, and mine also runs deep in the sense with other women, I've always been very closed off and unable to open up myself fully because I had a emotionally unstable mum growing up. So I always felt as though if my own mum, who's another woman, strong woman, can hurt me as a child, well, what's going to stop any other woman off the street, any other woman in my friendship circles, like any other woman around me who's going to, then I'm like, they will hurt me as well. If, the one woman in my life is meant to keep me safe and nurture, I felt like I didn't get that. So it's always, we had the same like concept around other women. So I always felt similar. Can't really open up, always a bit cautious. Like around men, I'm I'm like, I can talk. I've had a dad that was just beautifully always there, like strong in his fatherhood to me. So I always felt extremely comfortable around men. Not that I had to yearn for any attention, just that I could hold my own. I could talk to them. I don't feel any type of way. I can just talk to them like another human. But with women, it was different. So it's been a real journey for me, I suppose, in my development, in my business as well, trying to connect with other women who, one, are on the same level, two, that understand that kind of feminine wound. Because I do feel like, I suppose in the development world, I do feel like there's a lot of talk around, connecting with another man. Like, how do you date? How do you do this? And I'm like, oh, what about like, how do you connect with other women if you've had a bit of issues with that feminine wound, with that mother wound? You hear it, but I feel like maybe for me it's not been as prominent. So it's been really interesting in my journey to find other women like yourself who's experienced the exact same. Like I'm still gobsmacked over the fact we've had so many similarities in our upbringing and our development. But yeah, it's been difficult to find women on that same page to really connect with and understand me at a deeper level and actually see me for the woman I am because of what I've experienced, but not see it as a threat or an intimidation or a way to try and cut me down, Like it's
100%.
been,
yeah. I used to maybe like 7 years ago, before I really started my spiritual journey or personal development journey, when I actually started to look really deep within, like really wanted to figure out what are my programmings, like what are the stories that I tell myself, right? Because on the outside, I could see a pattern, like me being very uncomfortable and closed off and thinking, oh, somebody's going to betray me or hurt me when it comes to women. And again, it goes back into our upbringing, right? And similar with your story, my mom was also very emotional and unstable, so it was never safe to be around. However, I have a very beautiful connection with my father, which is literally like very similar to yours. Just very grounded, always there, always calm. And I think it's so beautiful that we both had this kind of experience. Yes, it was very shaky on the feminine side, but the masculine side, I think it's beautiful because we honor and respect men truly. Like, I really do. And whenever I hear women talk about how all men are cheaters and like liars, I cannot sit straight. I cannot relate. And sometimes I would voice my disagreement, and it's sometimes, most of the times, it's not well received, but personally, I am just blessed and lucky, as you are, to have that authority in our life, because our men are lucky then, because we really truly honor them, see them, and support them when they're vulnerable. It's so important, because this culture nowadays is like, I don't know, it's just so degrading to men, and it hurts to see. So
I completely agree. And I think, look, I understand, and I'm not going to invalidate some people's experience with, the toxic masculinity, but I truly believe that it has gone too far. I believe that for women, we need that masculine energy. So what I always talk about with my clients is the masculine and feminine energy need to be in this like unison, right? And I explain it by saying that the masculine is stable, it's rigid, it's the river bank, right? And it holds the feminine energy, which is the water, together. And if it wasn't for the river bank, that masculine energy, the feminine, the water, can't flow. It's nothing. And the beautiful thing with feminine energy is that it can be a force, so water gushing force, like, transformational. It can hold life. And we need the masculine, the rigid stability, the grounding, I suppose, to really help us be empowered as well. And I think people have just not realized, and maybe been a bit more polarized on saying, okay, there's all this toxic masculinity, don't be, too strong, don't be angry. I'm like, don't take that away from a man to be angry. That's not, yes, there's always, a positive and negative to anything, right? Everything needs to be in balance. But for that strong container, a woman can honestly flourish. And I say, we're the river, they're the river banks, or we're the water, they're the river banks. We need that to really allow our power to come through.
Yes,
Yeah.
agreed. No, I love that metaphor, analogy. Yeah, yeah, because we're sometimes unpredictable, just like the
Just like
water.
water, right?
Just can have a tsunami one day and then the
Yes.
other day still.
They keep us. They can try and like contain and, hold us, give us space, right? They give us the space to, be with our emotions, do what we need to do. And I will preface that by saying, yeah, you need a conscious man. I do believe that there is men who are still very heavy in their ego. I do believe there's men that, don't understand that type of dance between masculine and feminine. I do believe the conscious man is someone who is fighting for their purpose. They understand they are to tap into their femininity at times, but also be strong in their masculine. And I do believe that a conscious man is also grown and developed by a strong woman.
100%.
Right.
I
Just
could
putting it out
not
there.
agree with you more. I mean, we all know there's a saying behind every great man.
And there's a
There's
strong
great
woman.
100%. And
sure.
I always tell Dawn, like, I'm your biggest challenge probably, and like
Yes.
your biggest blessing.
Yeah.
Like, I just know
Blessing and a
it
curse.
wholeheartedly. Like, I believe that because I have seen him transform a
Yes.
lot. And we weren't together for 13 years, right? But like just 3 years of being together, and our story is crazy, is how we've met. It was from a mutual friend,
Yes.
and I was in a place where I was looking for that personal development that I've never had a coach. I was reading books and following, motivational speakers, but I've never done the work with myself fully, specifically on things that I wanted to work on. And Dawn actually became my coach first, is how we've met. Yeah. And then 6 months later, we actually met in person. And from there was the history, right?
Beautiful.
So the way we started, it was very much growth oriented. And he's not the same man that he was 3 years ago, and neither am I. And we talked about it earlier, how like people say people don't change, you can't change people. But like I can say that my husband has definitely transformed and changed, and I'm so grateful he did, because I can't imagine being with a person who just repeats the same things and does the same thing and isn't growing. And I'm sure it's the same for you guys. 13 years, I mean, you were babies.
Yeah, and I did everything that they say don't do when you date someone. I slept with him on the first night, pretty much. I also gave him the ultimatum. Like when I first met George, I was 18, he was 19. We were partying, like fresh, out of relationships as well. In our hometown in Australia, in Perth, like it's a very party culture. You go out all the time. And you're with like the same people you grew up with from high school. Everyone kind of just stays in the nest, and that's kind of it. So we were very big party culture. And I just gave him an ultimatum to say, I'm a party girl. I love going out. Like that's my thing. But what you're into, bit too much for me. So it's either me or that. And everyone says don't make someone change. You can't give ultimatums. And I'm like, well, I did, and I've now got a 13-year relationship. To be fair, what we've been through has been full on. I've been through so many highs, so many lows. And I think something that I don't see as much is this culture is full of red flag here, throw them in the bin, there's 10 others, right? I get it to an extent. But what happened to actually working for someone you love? Like what happened to actually trying to work through things? I get there's like an extreme, right? If they do one thing, that they can't come back from, all right. But I genuinely feel that we've lost that connection to really work through things and go through the motions. Like my relationship is not perfect, and I would love someone to tell me whose is. And there's times where I'm like, oh my gosh, should I have stayed? Should I have gone through, the highs and lows, like going through, we went through a really big business issue where we lost 80 to 90% of our wealth in like overnight. Right. And that was 6 weeks before the wedding. But it was one of the best things that had ever happened to us, because we started to go like this. George was on a growth journey. I was kind of stuck NPC land, like not really, on purpose, not really knowing my values either. So I was partying a lot. And we were going like this. And it wasn't until something bad happened where George was also in his ego. I was in my ego. and we weren't connected, and it took like a life event like that to really bring us back together and show that we're committed to each other. We want to grow and evolve. We had to go through some shit, but it's birthed like this beautiful new love that I would never have known had existed if we didn't just fucking stay and actually go through the motions. Like everyone's just so quick to throw things away. So many of my friends have been like, how did you do that? Like, I can't believe that was going on for you. Oh my God, like, how did you even let that occur? Like, why didn't you say anything? I'm like, some things are just there to be worked through, not paraded, not anything. I needed to know myself as a woman, is this for me? Is this the love that I know that I deserve? And I had to do some inner work as well. But I think everyone just has this false idea that, you know, it's all going to be red roses, the honeymoon phase lasts a certain time, and then it's okay. Then you get married, and I'm like, no, life is like with anything, success, relationships, life. Yes. It's like
cycles.
Backward. Yeah, cycles. Like it's like that. And I'm sure you've felt the same with Don.
100%. And in the moments like this, when you almost lose everything, it's like, it's a really dark space, and you start to have all kinds of thoughts, you know, for me, I think now looking back at it, we've gained a whole new level of like compassion and love for each other, and like really having each other's backs. Like that shit is like very rare nowadays, you know, like you said. It's so easy to just throw things out and be like, oh, the red flag, he's this, I'm gone. But what about the green flags? Like, what about the green flags? What about a man who just sits there and listens to you, you know, fully like there for you? What about like him affirming, you know, your beauty and like all his green flags? What about him opening the door for you, giving you flowers? Things. Like all of those green flags, I think, are a lot of overlooked and like looked at as norm, expectation, which there's a fine line between expectations and standards. Like, for example, we used to, especially in the beginning, when we're filling each other out, you know, knowing each other on that level, you know, there is a saying by Tony Robbins, change your expectations into appreciation, or trade expectation into appreciation. And I think sometimes it could be misinterpreted, because for me, and I'm sure for you, like you have a high standard of how you want your relationship to be, how you want to be treated, how you want to be loved, you know, because you did have a beautiful connection with your father, right? And then ultimatums is you drawing the boundary. Like, this is my standard, and I'm not willing to go below that. That's just a baseline, you know? And I think there's nothing wrong with communicating that to your partner if you're planning to spend the rest of the life. I mean, it's probably a good idea to chat about it.
So true. And I think also what I've come to realize in my relationship as well is, we actually spoke about this, so I just want to go back a little bit, how, you know, having that feminine wound in our relationship, I realized that I was a little bit masculine for a long time, right, in my relationship. Bless my husband, has, you know, stayed through everything that I put him through as well. Let's be real. Like, feisty, strong woman who was like, you don't need anyone, definitely comes with some issues and challenges. But having obviously the expectation of the man that I had as my dad actually put a bit of pressure on George, right? Because I was like, no, I've had this as my dad. You'll never come up to his standard. Like, my dad went through everything with my mum, and he's still the beautiful man he is. So it's been interesting to see me evolve in that space as well, to really, you know, communicate my issues around my feminine wounds, and being, it's like almost I suppressed being more feminine in my approach, because I was like, no, I relate more to the masculine because my dad was always there, and the feminine hurt me. So, you know, it's just been that really interesting, like, communicative piece that we've had to work through for so long as well. And
Oh, yeah, I can relate with so much. And I feel like sometimes I'm still trying to balance the masculine and the feminine, because for sure for me it's very similar. It's masculine dominant energy, and feminine is only when I feel comfortable. And I love to feel this way. Like, I love to actually feel so feminine, you know, and he loves it too. Like, the whole dynamic of the relationship changes once you just relax and like surrender to the moment and let the man lead, and then it's a beautiful state, and I love it. And then I also like to go and kill it in business, you know, and then be masculine, be, you know, more assertive and ambitious, I guess, you know. So yeah.
Do you find also when in business you've had to really talk about that as well with like anyone that you've been around? Like you've had to either dim down your masculinity and find that with other people?
Well, I tried so many different things because nobody gave you a book on how to do marriage or how to do marriage and business together. I mean, of course, there's like great people like Elana, you know, she writes about it all the time and talks about it. But you feel like your experience is always different. So I tried many different things. And one of them is, of course, I just naturally dim my light and see what happens. Then I feel like I'm not fulfilled or satisfied, you know. So then of course, we had talks about like, hey, I feel like our intimacy is not there anymore, you know, because we're so into the business that, you know, especially when it's stressful times, I feel like we're losing the connection. I feel like we're getting disconnected, you know, and I guess I can call myself lucky because we can talk and sit through these conversations where he can communicate what's going on in his mind and in his world. And then I can see that and realize, okay, this is not me. Like, this is just a hard time, and I have to be that strong feminine support where I can just support him as much as I can without trying to be the leader in that moment, you know. And then also I think it's great to have a third opinion on things. Like we both being coached, you know, we had a coach specifically for that time of our life where I couldn't understand what was going on. Like it was just way too much. It was too cluttery in my mind where and it was sometimes even hard to have conversations, you know. He would not hear what I'm coming from. I wouldn't understand. And I'm like, shit, like we have to work through this because I'm that person that I need to get it resolved. Like I cannot be in that space for too long. I can't sleep. Like I don't like that at all. And so we did, you know, a few sessions, and it was beautiful to one of the things, the very first thing we did, which I think every couple should do and practice at least once a year, is sitting down and identifying what your values are.
Yes, so important.
Personally, but also as a couple. Like I have my set of my own values when it comes to business, when it comes to relationships, you know, when it comes to family, it's all different set of values. So is him. And then we also came together and we did this really cool fun exercise where we wrote down all of our values as a union, and then we wrote our top 5, and it's in our bedroom, you know, we're always looking at it. Like, so we're always reminded this is why we're here. This is where we're operating from. And I think today, most people are not even aware of what their values are. Because everyone has values, whether you know it or you don't, because we live every day, we do things every day, but we're doing this because there is some kind of motivation. But what that motivation? What is it? You know, and some people are just on autopilot, NPC, because that's how it was their entire life. You know, if they saw their mom being so toxic, then they just do the same thing. And that's when I started to notice, I don't want to be like that. I want to grow through the things that I was traumatized by because I know it's going to serve me in a better way. So I think identifying the values with your partner is so beautiful, because then you're constantly always reminded, like, this is what we stand for. Like, this is what we love.
And do you feel like knowing your values has also helped you? You mentioned just before, like you had traumas obviously growing up, and we've spoken about this as well. But you feel that if you didn't work on your values and, you know, what you stand for and things like that, and you didn't work through some of the trauma, that you will then, what you condemned in, say, your mother, that you will then become?
100%.
Yes. Yeah, I feel that so much as well.
Yeah, I don't think you can help it. Like, it just is. When you don't change anything, nothing changes. Correct. You know, it's like you have to look into it. And I think the first step is becoming aware of what that pattern is, and then really zooming out and just seeing, okay, like what had potentially caused this. You know, and there's so many different practices that you can do. There's inner child work, there's hypnotherapy, there is just obviously talk therapy, and so many different modalities, breath work. Sometimes the most crazy experience come to you and you're like, wow, this makes sense. Now I'm willing to go and change that. But to answer your questions, I think knowing your values actually kind of redirects you. It's like a compass, it's like a GPS for your life. You know, I used to struggle with indecisiveness. Like I could
Yes.
just not decide like to go one way or another in a certain situation, and it would drive me crazy. Like I would be paralyzed but not knowing what to
Yeah.
choose.
Analysis paralysis.
Yes.
Yes.
But then once you, for example, if it's in business, right, then you look at your values, and when you have them, you're like, okay, this corresponds to this, you
Yeah.
know, and when you really live abiding like or according to your values, then everything you want is going to happen, you know, because you plan for it, and your behavior, your habits supplement that,
Yeah.
you know.
And how did you find, like, we know a few ways. So George and I do a few like ways in getting your values. How did you and Don identify your values?
So, great question. It's very simple.
Yeah.
So we actually did that practice the first time ever when we both were in NLP training, which is
yes.
neuro-linguistic
Yeah.
programming training. And that was the first time I actually ever looked at my values, and it made so much sense why my life has been a certain way and what I might need to switch to go where I want to be. But to answer your question, how to identify what your values are, it's one question. What's important to you when it comes to blank? It could be business, it could be relationship, it could be family, because the set of values is going to be different from when it comes to business and when it comes to your relationships, right? And then, you know, you probably write out like 25 things like growth, passion, compassion, integrity, honesty, truth, fun, travel. Like it could be all these things. And then you got to put them in a hierarchical order. So then you kind of play this game like, if I didn't have this, like would I be okay with having this, like, and then you kind of put them in order. It's really fun, and you just get to know yourself more, you get to know your partner more, which is really beautiful, because then ultimately we are with our partners to grow together, to make each other happy.
Shared vision.
Exactly, share the vision. So then you know what he loves, what he wants, you know, and then what you want, and he knows that, and then you have the one that you have together as a union, because now you become a whole other entity together, you know.
So interesting, because we do it a little bit differently. So we have we do it whereby we ask, there's a certain question that we have, and we learnt that from our mentors, which we do feel is a little bit flawed because there's a lot more you can explore. So we don't look at it there's different values in like different areas of your life. We go, there's a one question, and it's if you had if money, time and location were no object, what would you be doing? How would you be living your life? And you write this answer, and hidden in that answer is what you truly value. Because when you take away the business, when you take away the material objects, when you take away everything in your life, and you just strip yourself and go, what's actually important to me in this life? You reveal your values. Because at the end of the day, you know, you can say, all right, in business, I want transparency. Okay. But like at a deeper meaning, what is that? Like, what is transparency? And for me, I found, you know, connection was one of my values. I value connection in relationships, in business, friendships, in my experiences, you know, and I find that the values that we've looked at are the kind of overarching ones we probably need to do now. Like, okay, in business, we can probably branch off in this type of way and these values and really be aligned in that. But we've done like the overarching in life. We have, for me, it's community, relationships, and connection, relationships, experience, I think. Yeah. And for me, I just know that relationships is huge, because I struggled obviously with my relationship with my mum. So what I had a void in my childhood, I now value in my adulthood. Connection was a big thing. I didn't feel like I connected with my family, right? So my whole life has been lived around having connection, right? Connection to myself, connection to, you know, people around me, because, you know, I was out of home at 17. I left home at 17. I didn't have the most connected childhood with my family, and especially my mum. So I value that. Like my self-sabotage comes from that. My, you know, everything has just come from that value of connection. And then experiences as well. I've just always been so big on experiences for me, because like leaving home that young was an experience. You know, traveling the world is an experience. you could say that work doing business with my husband is an experience, right? Having this experience with you, last minute we're like, let's do a podcast. I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go. Like, let's have this experience. Life is to be experienced. So it's interesting to see your take on values, because I think I've done like maybe the top layer, and I now need to just be maybe go fine tune it into like all the different areas and how I can like branch off that. So it's very interesting to see the difference.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that side as well, like the way you guys do it, because as soon as you said that, if money, time, or what was the third one?
Money, time, location.
And location wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as you said that, my mind went to, okay, this is my true hobby. Like, this is what I would love to be doing if nothing else was important, you know? And I think that's a really important question to ask, you know, because even me, I'm like, that's a really good question. Like, I'll probably be dancing, singing. Having fun, like, I don't know.
And then what does the dancing actually bring to you? And then
joy.
Joy, Is it connection to yourself as well? Like for me, dancing 100%. Is a connection to myself. Got no one else. I'm just like in my own world, connection to music. So it's like, you know, that kind of deeper, like what is actually there, why? And then it manifests the way that you experience that values, or manifests through the dance or whatever it is. Yeah. So it's a very interesting
definitely
question.
Joy for sure. Yeah. But I think when it comes to like the values, for example, so the one that I've shared is more specific and it's more practical, like, you know, where you're just reminded, like, if you're trying to make so let's say your 5 values are, you know, freedom, wealth, connection, family, and fun, you know, then let's say this is your values, right? The wealth is number 1. Yeah. But then you're not seeing any wealth, or like you're actually broke, or you know, you're not having any success in your business ventures or stuff like that. You're wondering like, why is that? But then you the list, let's pretend that the travel is number 2 and the wealth is a number 5 value. Then you're wondering, right, why am I not making any money? Well, it's because when you look at your values, your wealth is at number 5. It's not any top values. So you actually prioritize fun and travel, you know? So then you kind of can see, okay, this is where I might have to change what I'm doing for the next 6 months or whatever. And if my focus is to make money, then I probably should move that up and actually supplement it with habits that I do every day, you know?
I'm actually going to challenge you on something. So something that we actually try and avoid is having wealth on our values. And I'll tell you the reason why.
Is having what?
Wealth not on our values.
Wealth,
sorry. Yeah. So the reason we think that is because, look, I think there is a place for it 100%. But I think the overarching, like what does that fundamentally give me? Wealth for me is when I'm connecting through business, when I'm connecting with my clients, the money will come.
Yeah.
Right. When I'm connecting with my husband and we're, you know, doing, you know, our business together as well, we generate money. And I find like wealth for us is a byproduct of when we're living out our values. So our mentors, like always say, when you're living in alignment with your values, the money will come.
Yes.
Right? Because I actually believe wealth is something you need to definitely consider. Like our whole thesis around Quantum Club, which is what my husband's like forming, and I'm obviously kind of in the background with it, is health, wealth, mindset. So we know there's a place for it. But wealth can sometimes, to someone who's maybe not as conscious as us, will probably be married to the outcome of just money, and then lose sight of everything else, and just be so tunnel visioned and so just money that they lose connection to life, that they're so ego driven that they'll have moments where life will just smack them and be like, was the money worth it? Was it? Because I'm telling you now, for anyone listening, we've had the money. Right? We've had the money. We had the Lambo. We had the, you know, rolling around, like not really worrying about money, but it wasn't enough. We chased that, but it just wasn't enough for us because we lacked in every other area. We were just so focused on getting that money, looking good for the money, enjoying that money. But life fucking took it away from us because we were just too much in our ego. So it's interesting.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that, because wealth for me is also, and it has transformed the meaning over the years for me. In the beginning, I thought wealth is just something like you're just a billionaire, you know, you're a Warren Buffett, like this is real wealth. And obviously I've been through so many different personal development programs and, you know, coaching and all these kind of things, spiritual experiences. And for me, I think now the definition of it, wealth, is actually the connections, that relationships that we have, you know, all these people that we're meeting and building relationships with no agenda, you know, in our Rolodex. Like, I'm sure we have some big players that like we have connected with, you know, and definitely having that human capital, the relationships, like, especially I saw that when I was at my dad's 60th birthday a few months ago, and I just looked at how many people loved him, and he had like very influential people there, and I was like, wow, like this is the true wealth, when you are surrounded by people who just love you, respect you, and like they're literally there for you. I'm like, no money can buy this.
No.
And so that's why I think it's so important to stay in integrity with your values, and just in general in integrity, like with who you are. And when it comes to, you know, meeting other people and building relationships, I see a lot of transactional relationships, like especially because we're in so many different events and networking environments. It definitely dries you out, like you know, some people are just so transactional, and that's why I am also stepping back, and I'm being very intentional with the time that I put into building relationships. You know, when I say it's just a transaction, I would rather not. I mean, me and you chatted for 5 hours before we even got into the business side of things. Like, I didn't even know what you did, like, for work, or neither did you. You know, we were just chatting away, and I think that's the real connection. That's the real wealth, you know, is that you have those people around you. And, of course, being in alignment with your values, the money will come, you know.
And do you find, just on that, it's so interesting, like when you're building relationships, and I know you touched on intuition before, do you find that like you are such as soon as you meet someone, you've got like this compass and you're like, something feels off?
100%.
Oh, same. Mine's gone like wild at the moment, like just in the last, I think, year. And I just feel like I'm just so intuitive just with people now. And it's just so interesting being in these types of events. It's like I almost know who's like an NPC that's doing well or who's someone that's like almost there but not on the same level. You know, someone who's, it's just so interesting to see the change in myself. And then I feel like I can sense that in you as well.
Yes. Oh, definitely. I think it became very strong during, like, I would say it came with my spiritual awakening. Really. And my spiritual awakening, I think I'm still on the journey. It never ends, but
it doesn't.
The very first time it was probably during COVID, when all this stuff was happening, and I'm like, this cannot be real. Like, this just cannot be real, especially when I would talk to some of my close people, and I would just see so much dissonance, like, just, and I was like, this is insane. And so this is when my journey started, like, going within and, like, seeing what's true, what's going in the world, you know, and there's a lot of dark stuff going on. But to go back to your point, which was
the intuition,
yes, thank you, is during that time, like, I really became a lot more sensitive and to energies around me, especially women too. And before, it used to be very hard, right? Then I kind of overcome that mother wound. Then I started to connect with all the women, many women, like, so compassionate and open. And then I realized not everyone wants the best for you, unfortunately. And I am all for women empowerment, but I'm not for toxic women who will put you down or talk behind your back. Like, and to be honest, I don't get mad anymore at all, because it's just what they're going through. I was there once, you know, so I just have compassion and love for these girls. But intuition wise, I'm definitely more reserved when it comes to, like, meeting new people. Before, I would just go out of my way and introduce myself. Now I'm like, let me just feel it out. Let it just flow, you know. And it's flew with us, you know. Like, Don told me, it's like, oh, you know, there's this guy and his wife is here, and I'm like, cool, but I don't know who George is. I don't know who the wife is. I'm like, that's amazing. Like, But then it just naturally happens.
Yes.
And I'm so happy. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like not forcing anything, just let it come, you know, and definitely being able to like tap into your intuition and kind of see what's good and what's not.
Yeah, so beautiful. I definitely feel like I've been on that awakening since COVID as well. And I think COVID, especially in Australia, just showed me who was really ready to grow and evolve and, you know, maybe ask questions and be more curious about life, and who wasn't. And I think that just opened my eyes to just people and their energies and, you know, what's really going on for everyone. And I actually wrote a newsletter literally about this last week, about the judgment thing, and how I used to get so angry and upset when I heard someone say a judgment around me. But I just now am so in tune with the fact that when you're judging someone so harshly, you're just judging yourself. Like you are so unhappy and you have such a dissatisfaction within yourself that who you're judging is just a mirror. They're just a mirror for the shit that you haven't sorted yet. So when I hear old friends and they're like, oh, what she's doing is weird, like, you know, or anything like that, and it's coming from a woman that I've shared 10, 15 years with, you know, part of me was like, wow, me a year and 2 years ago would have been flipping. I would have been livid. But now I'm like, it's actually sad. Like, you're living a life now where you have so much resent for people getting out of that box that you've just put in your life. And I'm now living my life and doing what I want and trying to grow and evolve and meeting new people, because I've now tapped into some different type of frequency where I'm attracting different tribe, right? I fully believe in that. And it's sad. And I do have more compassion and a bit more understanding for the people who are stuck in that kind of, you know, judgment, not that intuition, you know, really closed-minded type of way.
What would you say if somebody's watching right now, for those the girls who maybe recognize that in themselves, that they get sometimes intimidated or judgmental about another woman? What would you suggest? Like, how would you cope, or like, would be your insight on that?
I definitely think for a woman who realizes that they're judging someone else very harshly, I would say just take a second and honestly ask one of the most confronting questions you could ask yourself, which would be, what is it in me that I display that exact trait? Or what is it in me that I haven't done that they're doing? Because I find when I have been that woman, just like you said, like I have been that woman, I have harshly judged so many people around me, but that's because they're doing something that I know I'm not doing, and I want to be doing that. But instead of me facing and confronting that in myself, it's easier to just slander them, easier to be like, oh God, how dare they do that? So really my advice would be just to take a moment and just have that reflection piece and just simply reframe and just ask yourself, what is it that is triggering me, and is that in me? Is that something that I'm not doing?
I agree. That's literally the same exact answer that I would give, and it's so true.
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly what I would. And even sometimes today, like, I mean, now, right? Like, I would, but I'm so much more aware of my thoughts now, to where I'm actually questioning, is this a true thought? Like, is this true? You know? And then most of the times it's just little things, you know, here and there. We obviously get sometimes insecure, you know. And so it's such a good way to just be committed to your own growth, you know, because once you do that, you attract a whole new tribe, and the doors just open for you because you're in that new frequency and level, you know. So I love that.
And you know what's so funny? I feel like if I was still in that judgment, like criticizing frequency, I don't think you and I would have connected.
No.
Like, we would have been
I don't think,
a bit like standoffish to each other, possibly. Like, you know, I'm in my like little bubble being like, oh, who's this hot woman? And then you might have been like, who's this woman who's with this guy that I've never met? You know, but it's interesting, right? Only now that we've done the work and we have that awareness and we are more open to people who are on that same level, it's like we had this resonance when we met. We're like, oh, there's something about this woman that I relate, I resonate. And then boom, it was just like boom, 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 like domino effects. You've had that, I've had that, we've done this, I've done that. Like, it was just this frequency mush.
No, it was like, I could feel it. Like, we couldn't stop. It was just like,
It's just
we're
like
the
now.
same people talking to each other. Yeah, so beautiful. So I guess we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
So should we talk about like some tools or things that maybe we use for since our conversation was kind of like about self growth,
Yeah.
self exploration, self development, what are some of the tools or practices that you've
Yeah, good
maybe
question.
both of us used for growth? Maybe something to do with our partners, to connect with our partners more.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll explore that.
Yeah, so tools for my own growth that I've felt have been really profound. Definitely having other coaches, speaking with other people. Like I know I'm on level, say, 10. There's people that's going to be on level 100. I'm not going to be intimidated by that. So I want to learn, I want to grow, and I want to evolve. I get inspired by people who are doing more than me. So definitely having, like you mentioned, you do that with Don, having coaches